Story 1. My wife has been using her annual girls' trip as an annual hall pass. Part 1. My wife, Gwen, 31F, and I, Robert, 33M, have been together for 11 years and married for 8. We have a set of 4-year-old twins, M/F. Our relationship the last 3 years has been spectacular. We spend at least one night a week together on a date, sex is regular, we discuss everything, have long intimate conversations, and financially we are hitting full stride. Both of us have growing careers. It wasn't always this good, but never has been bad either. We have grown up together. We had a lot of the typical couple issues early on and throughout our 20s. But each challenge just seemed to bring us closer in the end. That's what makes what I found out 2 days ago so much more devastating. My wife has been cheating on me. Every June, my wife and her best friend, Scarlett, take a girls' trip. It's been a tradition they've done since they were 18. It's nothing crazy, they usually just pick a nearby touristy town and spend the weekend shopping, or laying by a pool, or doing spa treatments. Nothing too over the top. She has this year's trip already booked and it's in just a couple of weeks. The other day, I was looking at our bank account app, and it wanted some mandatory info verification for privacy's sake. I clicked the button and it went into 2-step authorization. Clicked OK and it said it had to send me a code via text, but it's my wife's phone tied to the account. I begrudgingly got up and went and found her phone. I would normally ask but she was napping and I didn't want to wake her. I picked the phone up and hit for the code to unlock since it obviously wasn't going to recognize my face. I know the PIN, it's the same thing she uses for everything. Once unlocked she has Snapchat open, and there's a message from her BFF in the chat. It says, "Are you really going to go through with it?" A sense of dread washed over me. I really had no reason to feel this way, but something about the question just felt so off. I thought hard about how my wife would respond, and typed back, "Why wouldn't I?" Scarlett responded, "I'm just saying, 2 guys at once is pretty intense." My heart dropped, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Knowing I couldn't keep the charade up, I stopped responding and began looking through the snaps. There were 2 guys I vaguely recognized as being from my wife's past. Unfortunately, it's Snapchat, so when I clicked on them there was nothing there. I went into her phone deeper. Nothing in her texts or email. I looked through a oddly named folder and in it is WhatsApp. Here are the messages I was looking for. Her messaging with her old HS boyfriend, Donald 31M, making plans for their upcoming girls' trip. No smoking gun, no sexts or pics, but definitely flirty. Definitely making plans to meet at the hotel, and definitely planning on him bringing his college roommate, who was also my wife's second boyfriend, John, 32M. I couldn't believe she would do this. I was also wondering how long this has been going on. There are not a lot of messages, but I could tell that this won't be the first time Donald has joined her on the girls' trip. I knew since Scarlett would figure out that I sent that last response, I had to confront my wife when she awoke. When she finally awoke, some grueling 45 minutes later, she immediately picked up her phone. She didn't even notice me sitting in the chair in the corner of our room. After looking at her snaps, and sending a few back to Scarlett, she finally put 2 and 2 together and realized I had been on her phone. She looked over and finally noticed my presence. Her first words, said in a very aggravated tone, were, "Did you go through my phone?" Before I could even get a word out she starts laying into me about invasion of privacy. I became immediately engaged. How dare she blame me for anything? I tell her I know she is cheating, that she's talking to Donald and John, and that her and Scarlett's trip is just a cover. At first she tries to deny everything. Tries to gaslight me. Telling me I'm reading too much into the messages, that she is just catching up with old friends and knew I would act like this, that's why she didn't tell me they were going to get lunch. It was all BS. I got so mad this whole thing devolved into just screaming and yelling. I told her I wanted a divorce, and she said, "Really, you're going to throw away over 10 years over a couple of nothing texts?" Implying I was the one throwing things away, made me see the darkest red, and I said what I knew would get under skin the far more than anything else, "I'm not the one throwing it away, you cunt." Now I knew this would drive her crazy. She hates that word. She even gets upset when TV characters say it. I've never seen her that mad, but it worked. She totally flipped and screamed at me that she does this for us. I was mind blown by that statement, but she wasn't done. I'm paraphrasing from memory, but basically she just ragingly started spouting off everything. "Why do you think our relationship gets better every FING year? I deserve this. It's my free weekend, it lets me handle all the BS from the year, resets me. If you can't understand that, that's your problem. So what if I'm crossing some lines, are you not happy? We have it great, and all it costs is me getting one weekend a year off. At this point she softened a little but kept a stern tone. I get it, your pride is hurt, but it has nothing to do with you, this is for me. You can have a great life, I just need this once a year, and you need to make peace with that. We have a good thing going, don't F it up because you're mad now. I couldn't believe what I heard. I felt literally woozy in that moment. My chest tightened. This woman was out of her mind. I didn't say a word. I left the room, went to my car and headed for my brother's house. When I arrived I just texted my wife, I'm at Mickey's, please don't message me, I need time. I've been hanging out here for 2 days just under the guise of generic marital problems. She has texted me each morning asking me to come home and talk. I responded both times, not yet. I don't know what to do, I've never been hurt so badly, or so callously. I love her, but this is too much, I plan to go back home tomorrow and try and sort this out. I don't see how we ever come back from this. My wife has been using her annual girls' trip as an annual hall pass. Part 2. Well, it's been a week, so I thought an update was due. It's not a good one, and I am beside myself with what to do. Really feel like she has me by the balls here. So a day after my last post I went home to talk to her. She started off by giving what seemed to be a truly remorseful apology. Just not for what she has been doing, but because I was never supposed to find out, and especially not find out like this. She kept going on about how she loves me and didn't want me to be hurt. There was no remorse for the cheating and some blame shifting, telling me I shouldn't have been on her phone in the first place. She told me she wants our marriage to continue. I started to speak up and she cut me off and said to just hear her out. She began this like prepared list of reasons we shouldn't divorce. I can't remember all of it, but there were basically 3 reasons and all these sub-reasons that backed them up. The twins, we don't want them growing up in a broken home. They are so young and this is what they know. Neither of us wants to see them half the time. This was the only reason that I consider even remotely valid. Our relationship is actually great. We complement each other, have so much fun together, rarely ever argue, and when we do it's more a discussion. We indulge each other's likes. We have sex often. Just on and on. Up until a few weeks ago I would have agreed with all this completely. I tried pointing out that infidelity kind of negates all that. This is where I could see she felt no remorse and I could tell she believes all her own BS. She said the girls' trip is what makes all this possible. I was dumbstruck. She went on to say her yearly trip allows her to get all of it out her system. It's the reason she can be all these great things all year long. That anytime she feels a little resentment about something, or I'm just getting under her skin, or she doesn't feel like having sex or indulging one of my hobbies, she can always put that aside because she has this. I literally can't believe the audacity of this woman. Financial stability wasn't much, just her pointing out how much difficult it'll be with us both on our own, as we live so comfortably and get to do so much because we both are good earners. Who cares? When I finally got to speak, I told her how hurt, betrayed and insulted I was. She did tear up and apologize for hurting me, but at no point did she apologize for the actual cheating. Sticking to the idea that I was never supposed to find out. I asked how long, and she said 10 years, that's basically our whole relationship. I began to ask for more info but she cut me off again and said that talking about the past is just going to hurt more, she wants to talk about the future and what I needed to work this out. I told her if you want to reconcile then obviously this trip needs to end. She stopped me there and said, no, I'm not going to stop, I'm still going this year. I got pissed and yelled, then we are done, I'm leaving and divorcing you. This is when things turned worse. She sighed and said, no you're not, I didn't want to do this but you lose if you leave. We will split custody, we will split our money, but we will also split our debt and I have more than you, half will become yours. The house is in my and family's name, and is a premarital asset. Also, you don't have any proof I did anything, you saw some vague messages that are now gone. I bet you didn't send them to yourself or take pics, did you? This is a no-fault state with no infidelity clauses, you're F-ed. I'll be really devastated to be without you, I don't want you to think I don't love you, but I'll move on, here in this house, with more free time. You'll move in with your mom or brother, and be miserable trying to rebuild on your own. I felt so defeated in that moment, and she could tell. I sat there just wishing I could disappear. Gwen, seeing the collapse, moved in to comfort me, and I just let it happen and didn't respond at all. She started talking again, saying, "Let's just go back to the way things were. You can keep your life. I hate seeing you like this and will do everything to make you happy. You can tell yourself whatever you want for the 2 days a year I'm gone. I understand you need some time, so take it, but don't toss us away because of pride. This has been the most painful week. I don't want all this pain. I want the life I had, and I guess it's on the table. But you can't just erase it. The mind movies are brutal, and the realization that she feels no guilt, that she actually sees her cheating as a good thing, has my questioning everything. I feel like can't even trust myself or my judgment because I'm the idiot who fell in love with this person. I'm still here at the house. She is love bombing me like never before. Trying to initiate, making me meals, buying me stuff, complimenting. It's insane. I don't know what to do. Is it really possible to put this behind us, to just deal with it? I don't even know. No matter what happens, I lose, she wins. My wife has been using her annual girls' trip as an annual hall pass. Part 3. Well, she left this morning for her girls' trip. I spent the morning taking care of the twins. We did Play-Doh for a couple hours. It's amazing how intent their little distractible brains get when you bust out new tubes and a couple of big play sets. Anyway, it was welcome distraction from the turmoil of the past few weeks, which only got worse the last few days. I still can't believe she went. It is amazing how crazy her ability to compartmentalize is. I mean, every day she is just the best mom. She also has been trying so hard to make me happy. Even when I'm an a-hole to her, she just says, "I know that's the anger talking, it's valid, but I won't take it. I'm going to give you time to cool off." Like WTF. She has come on to me every day since D-Day, and I'm disgusted with myself because I've given in twice. Each time I feel literally sick. Meanwhile, she acts like it was the best time ever. I am embarrassed to report I have been doing the picking me dance, trying to get her to not go. In the end, it didn't matter, she still went. To Hannibal, Missouri of all places, for a damn craft fair, and to get railed by her 2 ex-boyfriends. Surprisingly, I have felt pretty numb today. Like I'm finally ready to accept this is who she is. I should have accepted it last week when I finally got the details out of her about the years of girls' trips that came before. That was painstaking to do in its own right. Not because I had to drag the info out of her, no, she seemed excited to share her exploits, but because she was so determined to not give me the opportunity to have hard evidence. This woman had me put my phone in the car, then have this conversation in the shower. Like, who even thinks of that? She started off by asking if I remember when her and Scarlett went to Santa Claus, Indiana. I said, yeah, we had only been dating like 2 months. She said, right. Nothing happened that time, or 5 years ago when I was 6 months pregnant with the twins. But every other time I have been with at least one other guy. At least? I inquired. She said, yes, at least. The first few years I didn't have a plan other than picking up a guy and bringing him back to the hotel. If he was a lame duck, I'd pick up someone else the next day. If he was good, I would keep him for the weekend. For some reason, this was actually worse than it being a full-blown affair. The idea that she was just picking up random dudes made my skin crawl. When I asked if she used protection, she said, sometimes. While disgusted, I pressed on and asked why she started cheating in the first place. She said, you remember we were having some serious issues just after our first year together. I had the trip coming up and was venting to Scarlett about it. She was having some problems with Sam, her then BF, now husband, and said we should cheat on you guys. At first I was appalled, but then she told me about how her mom has cheated on her dad forever. He just takes it, turns a blind eye. She used to get so mad at her mom, but told me one day something happened. When she was 16, Scarlett got sick at school and was sent home. She drove herself home and quietly came inside, only to catch her mom in the act. Upset and crying, she asked her mom why. Her mom told her because it makes her better. Having this over her dad lets her handle all the things that she doesn't like in her life, makes her a better mom and wife, and makes her feel alive. At first Gwen was skeptical of this whole thing and told her she didn't promise she would do it. Gwen did admit, though, the idea excited her. It wasn't until the first night that she realized Scarlett had invited a classmate to meet her at the hotel. She was going to be joining him in his room. At that point Gwen said she had some serious FOMO, and while they were out at a local college bar, she picked up a guy. Apparently she picked right, and kept him on retainer for the rest of the weekend. This is when Gwen went into a whole monologue reminding me about how she is all year long, but especially after she returns from the girls' trip. It's not untrue, she has always been super attentive and sexual for weeks after, that starts the second she gets back each year. It's crazy to think how much I used to look forward to her going, knowing that she always came back with her battery charged. Now knowing how she's charging it has me absolutely disgusted. I asked, "So how did we get to you having an affair with your HS boyfriend?" She said, "It's not an affair, we F one weekend a year, and message a little bit leading up, that doesn't make it an affair." But to answer your question, after the first couple years of random guys worked out, the next 2 years didn't, so I decided to do what Scarlett does and invite someone. The first time was a client and it went great. The next year, we had just gotten a hot intern at work and he was always flirty, so I invited him. The weekend was amazing, but when we got back he was clingy. I ended up having to threaten him, and I learned coworkers don't make good choices. I ended up reconnecting with Donald at our HS reunion 4 years ago. He's also married, so I knew it was safer than single guys, he had something to lose too. Don and John are still best friends. John is also married. Being with two at once has been a fantasy for a long time, so I figured why not, and just asked. I should have quit then, but I didn't. I did this pick-me dance for another week. But now she's gone for the weekend. But I'm about to be gone too, I'm not going to live like this. She thinks she has me, but what she didn't anticipate was me going numb. I might not have a plan right now, but I have time, and I will make sure she sees consequences for this. Edit, getting a few questions on the history between Gwen, Don, and John. Gwen and Don were HS sweethearts and decided to break up amicably right before going to the same college. They kept up a friends with benefits thing for the first semester until Don got GF. John was Don's roommate freshman year and they became best friends, so the three of them, and some others, hung out a lot. When Don got his GF, John asked if it was cool for him to pursue Gwen, and Don had no qualms with that and they all kept hanging out until John and Gwen broke up after about a year. Shortly after that I came into the picture and she lost touch with both of them until the HS reunion. Wife has been using annual girls' trip as an annual hall pass, part 4. It has been a long time since I last posted, but with as many people who offered support and advice, I felt I owed you all this 1-year update. I know everyone wanted me to just divorce and move on, and I would have loved to, but I also needed her to have consequences. It took me months of researching and planning, but when I was ready I was going to make her pay for her callousness. I knew I couldn't do scorched earth. Between my state's laws, custody, the fact we both have good jobs, dumpster fire was going to be the best I could pull off. But you know what, dumpster fire was good enough. I'll never forget the look on her face. When Gwen got back from her girls' trip, she tried to be her usual loving self, tried to initiate, tried to tell me about it, WTF. I played like a broken man while rejecting her. I slowly loosened up this facade, making it seem more and more like I was getting back to normal, and gradually allowed more of her affections. My whole goal was just for her to have a sense of security. I still remembered the threats she made right after D-Day. And I'll never forget her telling me I would be the loser in all of this no matter what. Well, I wasn't going to lose, she was. Her biggest flaw was complacency. She expected everything to just tick on as normal, and she was in way too much fog to even think I would pull the shit I did. My first plan was to hurt her financially. Not a ton I could do here, but I did empty our joint savings account. I then used that money to pay off my debts, notably the car that was in my name. I also hired myself a lawyer and got him to draft papers. Right at the end I used a decent chunk to put a deposit and first months on a rental house. I figured timing everything up just right to ruin next year's girls' trip was ideal. Over the last year I have been slowly collecting any and all evidence of infidelity I could on Scarlett, Don, and John. With the cat being out of the bag, my wife was so much more lax with her phone. Before, she was somewhat guarded with it, not suspiciously as I always respected her privacy for the most part, but usually she was extra guarded in the months leading up to June. Now, since she thought I was so beaten down I guess, she would just leave it laying around when she showered or slept. This allowed me to get screenshots, pics, and send them to myself. I discovered Scarlett wasn't just hall passing the girls' trip, she was having a full-on affair for years. The two guys I got enough to raise suspicion with a concerned spouse, especially if there were other red flags in the relationship. So we finally got to the week leading up to this year's girls' trip. She was going to leave on Friday. Unfortunately for her, on Wednesday the foreclosure notice on the house came. She came up screaming at me asking why I stopped paying the mortgage and how this going to destroy our credit. I took that moment to remind her that it wasn't my house, my name wasn't on it, she should remember she's the one that pointed that out last year. Needless to say, she was extremely pissed. She was raving. She was extra pissed when she went to check the savings and found out it was empty. For a few moments there she thought she was going to hit me. She probably would have had I not been filming this whole fiasco as it went down. The best part was she had to call her parents to cover the cost of stopping the foreclosure. Which I found hilarious. She put her dad on speaker, who began ripping into me, talking about his name is still on it, and finally yelled, "Why the F would you do this?" I simply replied, "Because your daughter likes to F other guys." She screamed at me, "You are such a f-ing a hole." She turned at that point and went out of the room to deny what I just said. Which couldn't have been more convenient. I took the chaos as my cue to send the infidelity evidence I had collected to the other spouses. Feeling content in my efforts so far, I went ahead and scooped the twins up and headed for my mother's house. We had a nice time. Gwen was blowing my phone up about the house. It was unfortunate she figured out I had stopped paying on her car too, it likely would have gotten repoed any day. The craziest part was she just could not fathom why I would do this. Kept asking me, wasn't she good enough? How could I do this? Why am I being so cruel? When I finally responded, it was because I came to realize just how far gone she was literally the definition believing your own BS. I told her, "You cheat on me every year, you were gonna do it again. Why would I stay with you, why would I help you or support you, you have lost your damn mind." She fired back in all caps, "I do that for US." I finally had my clear admission of cheating. I turned my phone off for the rest of the night. I returned home after work the next day. She confronted me right at the door. I apparently ruined Scarlett's marriage. Samuel had left and told her he wanted a divorce. I guess she is especially F-ed because they had a prenup, don't really know the details on that. Gwen had also gotten an angry and threatening call from Don's wife, so I guess everyone got my emails. Well, not totally sure, no word from John yet. She clearly wanted to fight with me when I got there, but I wasn't having it. I've had a year to process the loss of this marriage, I'm done. When I pulled out the divorce papers and served her, she melted into the floor, totally defeated. I had no comfort to give, I just gathered my go bag and returned to my mother's. That was a week ago. She has been begging me to come back, to work this out. She is finally promising to stop the girls' trip. But it's definitely too little too late. I got her together enough to work out a custody situation for the twins. That's really all that matters. As long as we can raise two decent humans, I'll be happy to co-parent. As for me, I feel like a new man. I got into the house while she was gone and got more things for my new house. I bought the twins new rooms with some money I had been setting aside to do so. The divorce will take time, I'm worried she will contest it, but I'll cross that bridge when it comes. For now I'm just going to try and enjoy each day, and maybe plan a boys' trip. Story 2. I witnessed a shooting today. My boyfriend's little brother is in 5th grade and had a trunk or treat event tonight. My boyfriend and I decided to stop by and hang out for a bit. We parked the car and walked up to the event. We spotted their truck and started walking towards it when we heard what sounded like a firecracker or some sort of firework. It hadn't even been 5 minutes that we were there. My boyfriend understood what it was before me, pushed me, and yelled, "Run." He dragged me by the arm, and before I started to run, I looked back and found where the sound came from. I still have the distinct vision of the gunman holding the gun in the air and firing another 6 shots. That's when I realized that my boyfriend was right and I held onto him and ran. My boyfriend called 911 and about 8 cop cars showed up within 2 minutes. Luckily some dads at the event tackled the guy and held him on the ground. The sight of desperate parents looking for their kids still haunts me. If my boyfriend had not grabbed me, I don't know what I would have done. In the end, the police arrested the guy. Allegedly, not sure, but everyone says it's true. We found out he is a cop and has 2 kids at the school. He is going through an ugly divorce and his now ex-wife called the cops before and warned them that he was going to show up and possibly do something. We also found out that the gunman had whispered in one of the attendees' ears, "You're all going to die," which caused the disturbance. I feel like I'm still in shock. I'm grateful for my boyfriend and that no one got hurt. Everyone was okay. I just don't know how I can erase the fear on people's faces from my mind as well as my own. My teeth were chattering and my legs were shaking with fear. My boyfriend just kept hugging me. I know it could have been a lot worse, but actually living what we all see on TV is a different feeling. Story 3. My wife got pregnant with another man's kid, and thinks I don't know about it. Me and my wife have been together for more or less around 5 years. I had met her at work, she was the manager and I was one of the line cooks working in the back kitchen. I had my suspicions when we first had our son. We decided that it was best I become a stay-at-home dad while she worked, as she had made so much more money than I did as she was a general manager. First she started saying things like she had to go to work parties as it was mandatory, or she'd be fired, or she was staying late at work because people had called off and it was busy. One day she had come on to me being very flirty and persuading me to have sex with her. Now that I look back, I think she was already pregnant at this point and wanted it to look like I had gotten her knocked up. Of course, like any man would, I fed her and came inside. About a month later she was telling me she was pregnant. I was cool with it, why not? When it came down to having our second son, I noticed that about a year into it, he looked nothing like me or my wife. Keep in mind we are both white, I have blonde hair and brown eyes, my skin is super pale and my wife is just almost the same. This kid, the more he grew, was really dark-skinned, Mexican hair, and looked like one of the guys you'd see from the Mexican Revolution with the big ol' mustaches. I mean, when I say Mexican, he looked like the typical stereotype of one. I'm thinking about getting a DNA test and leaving her because there's no way it's mine. Story 4. My husband put trash in a homeless woman's bucket instead of money. This is something that just recently happened 5 days ago, so absolutely nothing has been resolved, and that's why I'm here explaining this situation. My F-35 husband M33 put trash into a homeless woman's bucket instead of money. Me and my husband like to travel a lot. We were recently traveling to Los Angeles, California, and while we were there, we immediately began to take note of all the homeless people lining the streets. I know LA has a reputation for homelessness, drugs, and crime, but it's safe to say we were both very surprised at what we saw there, especially my husband. My husband is a very firm believer in the fact that everyone can pull themselves out of dark places and homelessness with enough effort. I also agree with many of the things he says, but he can often get extremely cruel when talking about these people, almost to the point of not even treating them like humans. Which is exactly what happened while we were in LA. Me and my husband were walking in downtown LA during the day, not the safest place to be, I know. We had passed many homeless people, but me and my husband just ignored them, despite me feeling genuinely sorry for a few of them, until one woman seemed to push my husband over the edge. She was holding a sign and standing next to a tent. She was asking everyone that passed for money to support her family, and most people just ignored her. She said the exact same thing to us, except for some reason my husband stopped walking and turned to look at her. I was obviously extremely uncomfortable, and I actually had to turn around and walk back a little because I just wasn't expecting my husband to stop. My husband told her, and I'm 90% sure this is what he said, "Shut your f***ing mouth, stop asking everyone around here for a handout and get a f***ing job. I feel extremely sorry for your children. What kind of example are you setting for them? That it's okay to beg for money? You're all parasites to this f***ing street." My husband then proceeded to grab a few wrappers and plastic bottles out of my backpack and put them into the woman's bucket. The woman didn't say anything and just went back in her tent with the bucket. I was extremely shocked and honestly a bit scared of my husband in that moment. I asked him why he would say and do something so cruel, and he continued to tell me these people are ruining this country and that almost all of them are capable of working or doing something along those lines. I told him I completely agree, but I kept asking why he put our trash in her bucket or why he had to curse her out publicly on the street. My husband told me he's hoping that what he did will motivate her to get a job and realize her situation. He said many other things, but I don't feel like it's relevant to this story. I don't really have any particular question, I'm just very worried about my husband and I feel like he was a different person in that moment. Story 5. AITA for not wanting to date my M22 high school bully, F22. I was in a religious school during high school. I was a boy with delicate features and thin. Even so, I never suffered from bullying until this girl came to school. To summarize, she liked to bother me until she made me cry because I admit it, I was a sensitive crybaby at that time. The worst thing she did was spread the rumor that I was gay. You can imagine what that triggered in a religious school. A teacher even tried to go further with me. Luckily nothing happened. During that time my parents divorced and I moved in with my dad. Even though I didn't want to, I ended up accepting. According to him it was for my own good. Then I understood why. My dad taught me to defend myself and be more independent. He taught me to never cry in front of a woman because if you cry she will know that she can make you cry, and other things that have helped me a lot to not suffer from bullying from men or women. When I was still in that school, I told my mother many times about the bullying. I told her who the girl was who caused everything, and she only told me not to pay attention to her and not to do anything to that girl. Then I discovered that that girl was the daughter of my mother's best friend and she had a certain attachment to her. I don't know why, but she always tended to defend her. Years passed, I had romantic relationships and all that, and now that I'm single, my mom told me that I could go on a date with a girl she knew. I was all innocent and said yes. It turns out it was a date with that girl. When we got to the restaurant, we sat down and we were both very quiet until she started talking. We had a couple of things in common but nothing more. When the date ended, I accompanied her to her bus stop. When I was about to leave, she tried to hug me and started crying, saying that she was sorry for everything that happened, that she was actually attracted to me and didn't know how to get my attention, and that she felt very sorry from the moment she found out that I transferred schools and that I was no longer living with my mother. I was like, okay, thank you, and I left. I didn't go home with my mother. I went to my father and I started crying in front of him. I told him everything and he hugged me and comforted me. By this time I already know how to hold back my tears until I am in a safe place, so it wasn't difficult. When I told him everything, he got quite angry with my mother, to the point that he was about to go to her house to tell her a couple of things, in his own words. It turns out that the reason for my parents' divorce was that my mom hid the issue of bullying from my dad and then her inaction about it. A few days went by and my mom called me saying why did I just leave the appointment, that the girl is very upset and wants another chance to talk. When I told her no, my mother started yelling at me saying that I should just excuse her and give her a chance. When I said no, she even started blaming me for her divorce. That's when I lost my mind and told her everything. We insulted each other, we yelled at each other, and in the end I told her that I care little about that bully's sad past and that for me she should suffer from abuse and then I would think that karma at least exists. Now, it turns out that my mom was with the girl at the time I said that, and now my mom is asking me to apologize. I talked to my dad and he told me that because of her I was almost abused, that if something happens to her it's not my fault and I shouldn't care. Then he took me to eat and we played a little Elden Ring with a mod to play cooperative. After that I felt much better and told him I would think about it. I know my dad and I know how cruel he can be with his words when he gets angry, and I understand that I was too. I will be honest, I do not feel guilty for anything I said. My life was too good until she came back to come into my life. I shouldn't have trusted my mother. I was thinking of apologizing, but I feel like they used it as an excuse to see her again, and I don't want to. Thanks to my dad's teachings I know that I shouldn't feel guilty for saying what I think if they push me to do it. Should I apologize? Or just cut contact with both my mom and that girl? I'm not trying to be the best one here, but I just want to have my peace back. For more context, I just broke up with my previous girlfriend because she moved to another country and we decided to cut for the best of both. My mom never approved any of my girlfriends, my dad is neutral about it, and being in the religious school was my mom's idea. My dad believes in God too, but he's pretty open in terms of abortion, LTGB, and other things that other religious people are so close. Story 6. Ada for telling my pregnant 19-year-old daughter she needs to move out ASAP. My daughter Rose, 19, was always a smart girl. She did well in school, and got a full ride to a great school that is locally. She's been living with me and going to school, and is doing well in school. She got this new boyfriend a few months ago, who I don't like. I can smell the BS. He constantly lets her down but covers it up with a big smile and grand promises. Despite my warnings, they're still dating, and now she's pregnant. I offered to pay for the abortion and take a few days off work to take her and help her recover. She said no. She's going to marry her boyfriend and they'll be one big happy family. He wants to move into my house, and she'll drop out of school while he works to support them. He's a bartender who doesn't go to college. I laughed at this idea, which made her mad. She told me that since he can't move and I'll need to step up and help with the baby more. Y'all, she has always been a very sensible child. I don't know where this all has came from. I flat out told her that if she thinks she's grown enough to have and raise a child and get married, then she needs to move out soon and manage being an adult with the child's father. I raised the one child I wanted. I do not want any more children living in my home. I told her I'd pay for diapers here and there and I'd still visit her, but this baby is 0% my responsibility. If she chooses adoption, which I'm pretty sure she wouldn't, I'd be willing to help her navigate that. She won't talk to me. My husband, her stepdad, is staying out of this but thinks I could help more. I told him he's welcome to go over and babysit for her and that shut him up, lol. I had my daughter when I was 19. I was married to her father who was in the military. I still graduated college on time at the age of 22 and everything worked out well for us, until he died in service. The fact that it worked out okay for me is clouding my daughter's judgment, I think. Her trashy boyfriend can't even offer her or her child health insurance. It is a completely different scenario. Also, so many of you are suggesting I still let her live with me and keep the baby. This is not happening. I do not want a baby in my home, period. And I'm not babysitting either. I'll do normal grandparent stuff like show up to birthday parties and buy gifts here and there, but that's it. Story 7. Reality is often stranger than fiction. About 10 years ago, I was having a debate with a friend about the episode of Friends where Joey gets ordained online and presides over the wedding of Monica and Chandler. My friend was dead set on the fact that this was something the writers made up for the show and could never really happen. He was convinced that being a minister who was able to preside over a wedding required years of training, licenses, certifications, etc. No matter how much I tried to convince him, he just wouldn't budge. So, I did a quick Google search and found the Universal Life Church, went to their website, filled out the necessary online forms, and voila, I was ordained by the Universal Life Church and legally allowed to perform all sorts of ceremonies, including weddings. His response was, "They're in Washington, that doesn't make it legal in Georgia." Another quick Google search of the Georgia state laws on marriage, and sure enough, I was legally able to perform weddings in the state of Georgia. He was finally convinced. Our conversation moved on to different topics and I promptly forgot about it. For 10 years. Until I was at an event that I host monthly, when I noticed that a friend who was there with me was on a clearly serious FaceTime call with his fiancée. He suddenly turned and looked at me and the other friend who were there and asked, I think only half seriously, neither of you would happen to be able to perform weddings, would you? To his surprise I responded, well, as a matter of fact. I then told him the story from above. At which point he asked me to preside over his upcoming wedding. So, I'll be doing my first wedding in a few months. What makes it even more interesting, he's agnostic and she's Wiccan, so I'll be presiding over / performing a Wiccan wedding ceremony, on Friday the 13th. And, since they're both in a motorcycle club, it's how they met, most of the attendees will be bikers. A Wiccan / biker wedding, on Friday the 13th, for one of my closest friends. I'm really looking forward to it. Story 8. A story to scare my son. Son, we need to have a chat about internet safety. I slowly crumpled down onto the floor next to him. His laptop was open and he was playing Minecraft on a public server. His eyes were locked into the action. Comments scrolled down the side of the screen in a chat box. Son, can you stop your game for a minute? He exited the world, closed the laptop, and looked up at me. Dad, is this going to be another cheesy scary story? Wahat. I faked hurt feelings for a second, and then grinned at him. I thought you liked my cautionary tales. He grew up listening to my stories about children who encountered witches, ghosts, werewolves, and trolls. Like many generations of parents, I used scary stories to reinforce morals and teach lessons about safety. Single dads like me should use all the parenting tools at their disposal. He scrunched his face a little. They were fine when I was 6. But now that I'm getting older, they don't scare me anymore. They seem kinda silly. If you are going to tell a story about the internet, can you make it really, really scary? I squinted at him incredulously. He folded his arms. Dad. I'm 10 and I can handle it. Okay. I'll try. I began. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Colby. His expression indicated that he wasn't impressed with the terror of the introduction. He sighed deeply and settled in for one of Dad's cheesy stories. I continued. Colby went online and joined several children's websites. After a while, he started talking to other kids in-game and on the message boards. He made friends with another 10-year-old boy named Helper23. They liked the same video games and shows. They laughed at each other's jokes. They explored new games together. After several months of friendship, Colby gave Helper23 6 diamonds in a game they were playing. This was a very generous gift. Colby's birthday was coming up and Helper23 wanted to send him a cool present in real life. Colby figured it wouldn't hurt to give Helper23 his home address, as long as he promised not to tell it to any strangers or grown-ups. Helper23 swore he wouldn't tell anyone else, not even his own parents, and set about mailing the package. I paused the story and asked my son, do you think that was a good idea? No, he said, shaking his head vigorously. In spite of himself, he was getting into the story. Well, neither did Colby. Colby felt guilty about giving away his home address, and his guilt began to grow. And grow. By the time he put on his pajamas the next night, his guilt and fear were larger than anything else in his life. He resolved to admit the truth to his parents. The punishment would be steep, but it was worth it to have a clear conscience. He squirmed in his bed as he waited for his parents to tuck him in. My son knew the scary part was coming up. In spite of his tough talk, he leaned forward wide-eyed. I spoke quietly and deliberately. He heard all the noises of the house. The washing machine bounced around in the laundry room. Branches scraped against the brick outside his room. His baby brother cooed in the nursery. And there were some other noises he couldn't quite pinpoint. Finally, his dad's footsteps echoed down the hall. "Hey, Dad," he called out nervously. "I have something to tell you." His dad stuck his head in the doorway at a weird angle. In the darkness, his mouth didn't seem to move and the eyes were all wrong. "Yes, son," the voice was way off, too. "Are you okay, Dad?" the boy asked. "Uh-huh," sung the father in his strangely affected voice. Colby pulled his covers up defensively. Is Mom around?" "Here I am." Mom's head popped into the doorway below Dad's. Her voice was an unnatural falsetto. "Were you about to tell us that you gave our home address to Helper 23? You shouldn't have done that. We told you never to give out personal information on the internet." She continued, "He wasn't really a kid. He just pretended to be one. Do you know what he did? He came to our house, broke in, and murdered both of us. Just so he could spend some time with you." A fat man in a wet jacket emerged in the child's doorway holding the two severed heads. Colby shrieked and gasped as the men dropped the heads on the ground, unsheathed his knife, and moved into the room to work on the boy. My son screamed too. He twisted his hands defensively over his face. But we were just getting started with the story. After several hours, the boy was almost dead and his screams had become whimpers. The killer noticed the wailing of a baby in another room and removed his knife from Colby. This was a special treat. He had never murdered a baby before and was excited about the prospect. Helper 23 left Colby to die and followed the cries through the house like a homing beacon. In the nursery, he walked to the crib, picked the baby up, and held it in his arms. He moved towards the changing table to get a better look. But as he held the baby, the crying died down. The baby looked up and smiled. Helper 23 had never held a baby, but he gently bounced it in his arms like a pro. He wiped his bloody hands on the blanket so he could stroke the baby's cheek. "Hey there, sweet little guy." The beautiful rage of sadism melted into something warmer and softer. He walked out of the nursery, took the baby home, named him William, and raised him as his very own. After I finished the story, my son was visibly shaken. Between ragged staccato breaths, he stammered, "But Dad, my name's William." I gave him a classic dad wink and tousled his hair. "Of course it is, son." William ran up the stairs to his bedroom in a fury of sobs. But deep down, I think he liked the story. Story 9: My crazy stepsister wants my Excalibur ending. As the years went by, Claire's behavior grew increasingly disturbing. She began to steal personal items from my room, clothes, notebooks, even my toothbrush. I confronted her several times, but she always played the innocent card, claiming she borrowed them because she missed me or wanted to feel closer to me. I started dating a girl from school, hoping it would give me some space from Claire. When Claire found out, she lost it. She cornered me in the kitchen, her eyes wild, and demanded to know why I needed someone else when I had her. I was taken aback, trying to explain that she was my stepsister and that it was normal for me to date. She stormed out, and for a few days, things seemed to calm down. Then, the stalking began. She followed me everywhere, showed up at places where I hung out with friends, and even managed to get a job at the same fast food joint where I worked. I was on edge constantly, feeling her eyes on me no matter where I went. One evening, I came home to find my room redecorated. Claire had replaced my posters with pictures of us, some of which I didn't even know existed. On my bed lay a scrapbook filled with photos and mementos of us, accompanied by a note that read, "For our future together." That's when I realized she wasn't just infatuated, she was delusional. I turned 18 and decided to move out for college, desperate to escape Claire's clutches. I chose a university in a different state, thinking distance would finally sever her hold on me. For a while, it seemed to work. I started to feel like myself again, making new friends and focusing on my studies. But Claire's absence was short-lived. She started visiting me unexpectedly, showing up at my dorm with elaborate homemade meals and gifts. My friends found her charming, but they didn't know the extent of her obsession. One night, after a party, I returned to find Claire in my room, sitting on my bed. She looked furious. "Why are you trying to run away from me?" she hissed. "We're meant to be together." I tried to reason with her, but she became hysterical, screaming about how I was breaking her heart. She then revealed a sinister plan. She wanted to have my children, convinced it would bind us together forever. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized how far gone she was. That night, I called my parents and explained everything. They were horrified and promised to get Claire the help she needed. I changed my dorm and contact information, severing all ties with her. It was a difficult and painful process, but I finally felt free from her grasp. Years have passed, and I still look over my shoulder, haunted by those memories. Claire is reportedly in therapy, and I've tried to move on, but the scars of her obsession remain. Whenever I see a familiar face in a crowd or receive an unexpected message, my heart skips a beat, fearing that Claire has found me again. Story 10. I secretly married a Muslim woman. Hello, great people of Reddit. I'm fairly new to Reddit and still figuring this out, so I apologize if this is in the wrong place. I will move if it is and will edit. I apologize, this is long. I probably don't have a lot of time left and for the first time want to share the story of me and my wife. Not many people know this. Maybe someday it'll help somebody out. Maybe it'll confirm I did the right thing. I very much appreciate anyone that took the time out of their life to read this, and please feel free to comment or ask any question. Backstory: I, white, Christian, male, 30, married a wonderful, brown, Muslim, female, 30. I grew up in Nowhere, Oklahoma, in a town of about 400 people. I was a bull rider most of my life, grew up farming, hunting, etc. I drove loud lifted trucks and swam in the river. When I left school early, I joined a not-so-great racial group. Just hear me out. Lived in a very patriotic conservative Christian town. I was your typical southern good ol' boy raising hell, slinging mud, and loved it. I left school at an early age, started working and partying like crazy. I moved to the big city as a teen, found some friends and had fun. One of my friends showed me a store that would sell me beer/tobacco that was owned by a Muslim family. One happened to be this cute girl, but obvious differences. I didn't have a lot of choice but to go there, but at least it was cheap. Over the next 2 years I somewhat got to know them, but not much more than I moved away for 2 years. I eventually visited to see my friends and went back to that store every day as still underage. This time something different happened. I noticed myself having happy conversations with them. With these great people from Bangladesh who were still fresh off the boat, so to speak, having only been here a couple years and still hardly spoke English. I started becoming friends with the daughter, going to the store or whatever together, and next thing I knew I kind of started to like her. By this point I was starting to realize that hey, these people aren't any different than me. They're wonderful, friendly people, and aside from accent/language and skin, they're no different than anyone else. I left the not-so-nice group now realizing that I was wrong for having the feelings I had towards other people, and that we're all just people and I was being terrible. By the way, where I'm from had nothing to do with it, all-white town, so no one ever talked about it and the people are very respectful. I ended up staying around just because I had feelings for her. Moved in with my friends and got a job. She was an incredible girl, absolutely beautiful, funny, very smart, sweet. She was the perfect girl. And we communicated pretty well. She spoke decent English and was getting better. Unfortunately, it could never be because of who I am and who she is. She's not gonna like me anyway, even if she could be with me. For months go by and I can't take it anymore. I asked her to dinner one night, which was normal. We ate out before, and decided I was going to ask her out. We had dinner, and at the end I was so nervous and scared and so many butterflies I could barely speak. I finally just forced myself to blurt out, "I love you, would you go out with me as a girlfriend?" As soon as that came out, my heart dropped to my knees. I knew it was gonna be a no and just wanted to die right there. I heard her say something and I was so worked up that I couldn't hear. I asked her what she said. I looked up as she happily spoke out, "Yes," with the most beautiful smile and shine. I could not believe she said yes. How? She can't even be with me. We snuck around behind everyone, dating and seeing each other every chance we got, even if it was for 2 seconds. We would even drive all the way across town or leave work to see each other for 5 minutes. We did it a lot. Nobody knew, but life was great. After half a month, to the day, I knew no matter what I wanted to be with her forever. That feeling that people say, you just know, is confirmed real. I knew that no matter where life took me I had to have her by my side. I just wanted to be with her every minute of my life. I worked as hard as I could, as fast as I could, and finally came up with the money to buy a ring, and I was gonna ask her to marry me. I nervously drove with her to our secret spot that afternoon and we sat by the water just talking. I worked up all the courage I had, turned to her and said, "Will you marry me?" After what felt like the space-time continuum froze for eternity, really 0.5 seconds, tears rolled out of her face as the most beautiful, wonderful, smart, gorgeous, kindest, loving woman I'd ever seen said yes. The feelings I felt were unlike anything I've ever experienced and could not begin to describe the feeling I had. This is happening. She's really mine, I'm gonna marry her. Fast forward after another half month of fun and one day we seemingly simultaneously said let's get married now. Still, no one knew of our relationship. Southwest we called the courthouse in a town an hour away and booked the closest available date, which was the next week. On the day we snuck away from our day, got dressed, met up and went to the courthouse. Nobody knew about us, so we didn't have the 2 required witnesses. Luckily the kind people at the court offered to fill in. And that day we got married exactly 1 month, to the day and down to 5 hours, from the moment I asked her out. I was the happiest man ever. 2 weeks later, unfortunately, someone in her family who was her CPA noticed her different last name on an important form. She didn't say anything and later looked her up on the court records site and proceeded to call every Bangladeshi person in the state to tell them she married an American. She still lives with her whole family, and that night I got a call of her freaking out that her family knew. I went over to their house expecting the worst and got met with huge smiles and hugs. They were actually super excited about us. Hell yes. The next week we got a house together. Few months later she got pregnant and we started our life. Fast forward and eventually we went back to my hometown and met everybody there. Everybody greeted her with wide open arms. My dad, mom left 4 years old, was happy and kind. And even though it was heavily Christian and almost no one had ever seen a Muslim or even a different color person before, I was proud that my town didn't see race or religion or language and saw she was a great person and truly invited her/us into their homes. She gave birth to our wonderful, awesome, healthy son. And we officially started our own little family and life. Life was perfect. After 7 years of marriage, life, and raising our awesome, incredibly smart, wonderful boy. After the years of sickness, I got very ill and bedridden for several years, ups and downs, and all the twists and turns life has thrown at us along the way. I'm still madly in love with her just as much as the day I asked her out. Ran off and got married after just a few months of even really talking, and it couldn't have been better. Technically we're not supposed to be. She can't marry a Christian. But we respect each other, our beliefs, and support each other no matter what. Religion never ever gets in the way, and we really don't even talk about it unless we're trying to learn something. We don't force either religion on our boy. He can be whatever he wishes and we'll support him. I'm not sure if as a Christian I can marry a Muslim, but I always tell people the same thing when they ask about it. God says no matter what, we have to respect each other. No matter who you are or your religion. To love one another no matter what and do all you can for others. That's all the permission I need. We have a wonderful life and family. We live in a wonderful place, have wonderful jobs, and I'm the happiest I've ever been and couldn't ask for more. The Lord has truly blessed me and life is perfect. Never judge someone over your differences. When you look deep, we're truly unique yet truly all the same. We're just people who want the same things in life. We all just want to be happy, to find love and be loved, to be safe and to be comfortable. I now study other cultures' medicinal history for a living to bring people safe, natural, and effective medicine. It's incredible what you can learn about the world and its people when you open your mind. Let down your fears, your barriers, your prejudices, and open your eyes to the incredible world out there. People are an incredible thing. We're indescribable and full of greatness no matter what part of the ball you're on. You'll find the most incredible things and people in the most incredible places. And you'll find the most joy and humbleness. Thank you to anyone who read this. I deeply appreciate you taking the time out of your life to do it. There's a possibility I may not make it to my desired age due to many health problems and just wanted to put my story out there. Maybe somewhere along it'll help someone or keep someone from being bored. Please be nice. Thank you all. Story 11. What's a crazy story you've been wanting to tell but there's never been a thread specific enough for it? Okay, long useless story of fuckery ahead. A few years ago, I was promoted to a management position within the software company I work for. I was told I was hand-picked for the job and, though it was a big promotion, I would not receive a pay increase until I had the team performing at minimum required performance standards. 2 years in, I had the team running the best numbers it had ever seen, far exceeding the minimum standards. Every quarter, I asked to be reviewed for a raise, and every quarter a reason was found to skip the review. Finally, I brought HR into the mix because I'm nailing this and busting myself over here. Miraculously, a date was set for the end of the month. Funny how that works out. Alas, a week before my review date, where I would surely be granted my rate increase, my direct supervisor, a micromanaging weasel of a man, and the CEO of the company, rewrote the minimum requirements to just barely exceed my team's current projected stats. When I came to him, fists clenched, he explained this move as an unrelated adjustment to compensate for improved average performance. Totally legit. Of course, with this change in place a week later, he took the opportunity, with the HR director in attendance, to express his deep and profound disappointment with my performance and to warn me that he expected me to go the extra mile next quarter or face disciplinary action since my team had failed to make the new grade. I was angry. So angry. I wanted to complain, but hey, it's the CEO. Who am I going to complain to? He knew that too and sneered at me anytime he could. That's why I worked even harder, neglected my family and personal health, and worked to drive my team to their limits. We made it too. I was going to show that Dick Stain he couldn't win. Unless he cheated. When it became apparent that he was going to be forced to eat the pile of shit he shoveled to me in the previous meeting with HR in attendance, he called me into a meeting to design a training handout for the team. We bounced ideas back and forth, but something was weird. Every time I tried to assign a task to someone or set a due date on the handout, the CEO dodged it. By the end of the meeting, we had accomplished nothing solid and he tabled the assignment for a later date. Because it was tabled and I assumed we would reschedule a follow-up, I filed my notes away and moved on with other work. A month after the planning meeting, I was pulled into HR and written up for failing to issue the training handout we had tabled. The CEO was in attendance and brought his personally typed meeting notes clearly outlining that I was assigned the task that day. I had no recourse. He was lying. I said as much and was treated like a combative child. He acted insulted and incredulous. By the end, I was sent home for the day with a demotion off of the team I had built and worked so hard for. I still don't know why the CEO had it out for me. He hired in his most ass-lickingest assistant manager to replace me and told everyone he could how bad I did in that position. I'll never be chosen for something like that again because this a-hole decided he didn't like me. That's it. No revenge. No justice. The bad guy wins. Maybe one day he'll die in a fiery car crash. One can only hope. Story 12, Security Exercise Gone Wrong. I was a mechanic on a small post with an ammo depot, a single battalion, and not every company was on post. Every few months the platoon leaders would pull their noses out the COs long enough to give the platoons their OPSEC briefings. They'd go over the OPSEC plans and brief us on the security plan in the event that someone or some group tried to infiltrate the depot. One Friday after one of these briefings, LT pulls all of our NCOs inside to have a meeting. The rest of us went to work and shortly before lunch we headed in to change out of coveralls and secure our tools. A few of us were walking by the squad leader's office when we heard them talking about a security exercise scheduled for 0200 and how they weren't supposed to inform us. They were talking discreetly, you know. With the door open, just as some of their senior E4s were walking past, quietly loud enough to be heard. After lunch I pulled my squad leader to the side and asked him what was up. He told me that he was under orders not to discuss that but that it might be in my best interest to get to bed early. He also let me know that I should definitely not tell any other soldiers and I certainly shouldn't discourage anyone from going out partying because this was supposed to be a spontaneous exercise to test our base's security. I would never do such a thing. A soldier must have some integrity. Judging by the size of the smile on the duty sergeant's face when she pulled the barracks door open just before 2, the idea of rousing us from bed early Saturday morning must have given her one hell of a hard-on. She was probably watching the clock with anticipation. You should have seen the joy drain from her face when she walked in and nearly everyone in the barracks was standing in the hall shooting bull, all of us in uniform with our rucks by the door. She sputtered and stammered and demanded we rat out whoever told us about the exercise. What exercise, Sergeant? We're getting ready to go out and play paintball. We produced 8 paintball guns to show her we were serious. I don't know why she wasn't convinced that the entire barracks wasn't going to play paintball too on a Saturday morning. Sure, we were all sober, but still. She spent a few minutes trying to persuade, cajole, and threaten a name from us, but we had no clue what she was talking about. Ma paintball. She assured us that we'd not heard the last of this and told us to get to formation. We did formation, checked out weapons and Miles' gear, then broke into our assigned groups. The QRF was given a briefing and we drove to a building near the center of the depot that was designated as our staging area. We sat down and pulled out some of the snacks we'd packed for paintball, knowing that we wouldn't have much time to eat. Then we waited. And we waited. We waited so long that I took some naps. Long enough naps that other soldiers woke me up to tell me that I was snoring loud enough to wake them from their naps. The only calls we heard on the radio were from members of the QRF doing radio checks. The radio was dead air otherwise. The NCOs kept urging the LT to do something, literally anything else besides sitting here with fingers in ass. But LT was given orders to stay in place until contacted, and he intended to follow those orders to letter. The NCOs were growing increasingly frustrated and the LT just wouldn't budge. Around 9, one of the senior NCOs asked to speak to him outside and they moved near a Humvee. We couldn't hear them talking, but the conversation was animated. As they were talking, another Hummer came rolling down the road at a high rate of speed, screeched to a halt near them, and a red-faced captain jumped out. He marched right up to the officer and absolutely blasted him. The poor sergeant was backing slowly away, trying not to make a movement sudden enough to be noticed. When he'd backed a safe distance, he about-faced and quick-timed it back to the building. An intense discussion occurred and the officers dug in their pockets to pull out their notebooks, comparing notes, pointing back and forth, Captain yelling and LT shrugging confusion. LT came back in and told the NCOs to change the radio frequencies. Maybe 15 minutes later we were told to return to the company area, exercise over. The formation for lower enlisted lasted minutes. We were instructed to return our gear and were dismissed for the weekend. While we were doing that, the officers were herded into HQ. On Monday morning, my squad leader let me know what had happened. Earlier in the week, the platoon leaders were given the radio frequencies that we'd be using. Apparently those had been changed Friday evening, but the LT in charge of the QRF had not been informed. Our butterbar was incompetent and chose not to send a runner despite having no communications with command. He made no effort to regain comms and actively interfered with the NCOs trying to. He was so scared of making a wrong decision that he made all the wrong ones. Command decided not to send a runner despite not receiving responses from the QRF. No explanation was given for that decision. And despite not receiving responses from the QRF, Command didn't try moving any forces around to deal with threats. Most of our perimeter was twiddling thumbs while a handful of spots got hammered. This is the single most spectacular display of military incompetence I had the pleasure of witnessing. Every decision that was made was the opposite of a good decision. We all know that stuff rolls downhill in the military, and when there's a F up, some lower enlisted usually gets the blame. That's really the best part of this story. We were released from the exercise before noon. Sure, we'd lost our morning, but it was supposed to be an all-day affair. The officers and NCOs spent the entire weekend debriefing and dissecting that exercise, and they couldn't even try to blame it on us peons. Even the NCOs were mostly spared. The ones with us all advised the LT to do something, but it was his decision to make. Yeah, they had to sit through the meetings over the weekend, but all the shit landed squarely on brass for once, and in volume. It's been almost 3 decades and I wasn't privy to everything that happened afterwards. The LT in charge of QRF was from a sister company. He wasn't someone I was familiar with or saw on a regular basis, and command isn't going to announce disciplinary action for officers, so I can't tell you what the consequences were. But I can say it was one of the few times that the officers had to feel the full weight of their own ignorance without being able to pawn it off on those of lower rank. And the duty sergeant was wrong. We did not hear about this again. I suspect that nobody wanted to talk about the exercise again after that weekend.